Guru Nation, welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. This is also going to go on YouTube. This is going to go on the podcast. This is going to go everywhere. For this video, it's very important that you pay attention to the show notes because I have Ellen Badenko on. She's a clinical research professional, a registered nurse. She has a long career in research, in private industry research, in academic research, back and forth. Same time, everything. We want to talk about academia versus industry and vice versa. We will. You want to talk about career? We will. But probably most importantly, Ellen reached out to me. She didn't want to talk about her career necessarily. That's not why she reached out, but I'm glad she did because it's valuable information also. She reached out because she's Ukrainian and there's obviously a crisis happening right now in Ukraine. I'm sure everybody knows about it, and they need donations. So maybe we can start with that. Like, if you're a research clinic or a company in this space and you have supplies, Ellen, thank you so much. Why don't you take it away? Let's start with that first because it's the most important. What kind of supplies are you guys looking for?
Thank you so much, Dan, for responding so quickly to my just random message
Thank you.
on LinkedIn. So supplies, as far as supplies for Ukraine, there is a list, and surprisingly, there is a lot of stuff that the sites can actually contribute from the supplies that the sponsor doesn't want to take back. That includes Band-Aids, tape, gauze, IV start kits. It depends on what kind of site you are. For example, if you're a diabetic site and you have diabetes site and you have the strips, maybe the sponsor provided you test strips for urine, you can donate that. So there is quite a sizable list. What I would like to say is that expired supplies are not accepted because the supplies will go through a nonprofit here in the United States called Razum for Ukraine. And I will have to triage. So Dan will put my contact email for the donations in the chat. It's ukrainerelief38@gmail.com. And then I'll triage, I'll contact you which supplies would be appropriate. I will then have to reach out to Razum for their approval. And after that, we'll coordinate the donations. And
so that's ukrainerelief38@yahoo.com.
No, at gmail.com.
Oh, Gmail.
Yeah.
Yeah, who what's Yahoo? I still have a Yahoo, but that's old. Okay, Gmail. ukrainerelief38@gmail.com. That's
Thank
right.
you. Yeah. And then
okay,
obviously, if your office, if your site would like to just donate supplies or donate the funds for the purchase of the supplies in bulk, I will have that information. Then we'll put it in the chat later.
Okay, so we're gonna have that email in the chat, and we're gonna have the LinkedIn profile for Ellen in the chat because I know you guys also. There's really two audience watching. It's sites and it's people interested in their careers. Sometimes there's some overlap, but it's usually two separate type of sub audience. So both of you, this is important for you guys. So I guess before we get into your career, because you have connections in Ukraine, can you give us like an update of like what's happening and what the greatest needs really are, like when it comes to, let's say, medical?
I'm from Kharkiv. That's the city on the border with Russia. And my native city has been bombarded so hard, it's literally been razed. They're trying to raze it. And I'm in contact with people all over Ukraine. Some parts, of course, suffering a lot more than others. The most acute need is, of course, for medications and supplies that are suitable for like what's called tactical medical. I'm not quite sure, honestly, if this is the term that's used here in the US. I just haven't had a chance to look it up, but it's tourniquets and Silox type dressings, that stop the bleeding,
Hmm.
anything of that nature. Another need is to supply the hospitals, um, airways, ventilators, anything that has to do with, you know, again, surgical supplies, gauze, padding, like there's a whole list. And then I was just thinking people who are leaving Ukraine. As you know, there are now millions of refugees
Hmm.
going through Poland, Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, going to Germany. So in Poland, I actually personally know two teams of US medics that went there and they help people, sick people right there, triage them at the train station, help them with whatever they need. So they need our support as well. And um, nobody canceled diabetes, nobody canceled dialysis,
Yeah.
all those COPD, all those things are still there, and just run of the mill infections, traumas. So all kinds of supplies are needed. So those are like three tiers of supplies when we're talking about medical.
Yeah. Next week, I think next week I'm having somebody from Ukraine who works in clinical research in Ukraine. I think in Kiev. Uh, I'm gonna have him on, so we'll get like a kind of a firsthand account of what clinical researchers are dealing with, and then after you watch that, remember Ellen's email. Come back and check out the email, and
Thank you.
anything helps, guys. So we're definitely. I mean, this is something that's still developing and doesn't seem like it's gonna end, at least in the near future. So, but we can just give our best support the best way we can. If you're a site, you get supplies. Everybody's got some kind of supplies that they don't need. So reach out to
Yeah.
Ellen. Thank you
I
so
reached
much for
out
that,
to
Ellen.
Thank you. And I also worked a little bit in home care, so I reached out to my home care office,
Ah,
and
yes.
anything that they don't use, the patients, long-term care patients might be switching their treatments, their supplies, or um, Foley catheters, splints, like anything, dressing, gauzes, tube feeding, supplies, syringes, anything goes. By the way, Dan, I'm so glad that you mentioned that you're having somebody from Ukraine
Hmm.
um, on your podcast next week. I hope that I can attend.
Yeah.
My One of my recent positions was a clinical trial educator for a Parkinson's disease trial, and we had sites in Ukraine. Have sites in Ukraine, so I reached out and I kind of informally talked. So some patients left, some patients still there. The educators are banding together, supporting each other, trying to support the patients. And my heart goes out to, of course, everybody in Ukraine, and especially the most vulnerable, the disabled, the children. The patients who finally perhaps enrolled in the clinical trial that could change their life. There's
Yeah.
oncology going on, research was going on in Ukraine. So
That's crazy. I mean,
it's
it's stressful enough if you're,
yeah,
you're considering an oncology study, and then to add war on top of that, that's unfathomable for us here in the United States.
yeah. And from
Um,
what I heard, the clinical research um, teams, they're really rising up to the challenge and support each other and the patients as much
it's
as they
crazy,
can.
especially for things like oncology. I mean, on other indications, maybe dermatology, you can kind of understand, okay, let's put things on pause. But oncology, something like that, that's urgent, you know, it's not like you can just turn it off. Like you said, your medical conditions don't go away just because there's a war. Um, you're still going to need the alternatives, the treatments, the different options. So, our thoughts and prayers over there in Ukraine, and researchers, we'll be having more from Ukraine, and we'll definitely have more on this topic, and maybe we'll re-explore some of it during this interview. But Ellen, so you mentioned clinical research educator. I did see that on your resume. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Like, when did you first get introduced to clinical research? I know you're an RN. So when did you, was that during RN school, nursing school, before, after? When did you
I
discover
think
research?
so. Thinking back, the first time I heard the word IRB was indeed during my nursing school. I was doing a poster presentation and I decided to do my own research about the patient caregiver relationship in home care. And I had a fantastic advisor who unfortunately had passed away years ago. And she looked at my protocol and she's like, well, okay, um, we need to get it approved. I totally didn't understand what that meant. She took care of everything. So that was the very first time I heard about the IRB. And then I became a nurse, worked bedside, medical, surgical, critical care, recovery room, kind of get antsy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and saw that a nurse was coming in, a coordinator was coming in into recovery room and doing like we were drawing blood for her. It was anesthesia research, and I get very interested. And I asked, "How do you get into that? What do you do?"
Mm.
This person was very, very nice, and we had lunch in the cafeteria. And she said, "Okay, so you go to this website," and it was a big university. It was at Jefferson at the time. And she said, "Take the course, you know, protection of human subjects course." And that's what I did. And she told me like about she was doing rheumatology research at the time. Um, to me, at that time, pretty much everything was so new. I really didn't know. All I knew is what I wanted kind of to try to do what she was doing because it looked like something interesting
Was she
with
a
more
nurse too?
autonomy. She was a nurse, but she was the coordinator with small practice, I believe, and she was doing everything from soup to nuts. She was doing the
Mm-hmm.
budgets, she was doing the ICFs, she was enrolling subjects, and she was there as needed to actually collect the blood, spin the blood. Like she was doing everything. I didn't know it at the time, you know, like what really was going on. But I just really thought I liked the idea of being more autonomous
Hmm.
and perhaps better work hours as opposed to doing shift work and being on the cutting edge. So those
So
things really appealed to me.
this nurse worked at a small site?
No, she worked at Jefferson, but it was a
Okay,
small
okay.
department. She was
Okay.
supporting a small department.
Gotcha.
And the way I got to interact with her, she was helping out the anesthesia group with their research. And then that's why she was wandering into the PACU, you know, collecting blood work. And
Yeah.
that's why the consent forms were in patients' charts, you know, and
So
got to
you
read
just got
them.
curious and said, "Hey, what is all this stuff? This is
I
different than
knew I
what I
wanted
do."
to, yeah, exactly. And she was nice. And then I took the course, and when the positions opened up at Jefferson in phase one unit, I applied. I
Ooh,
already
phase
had
one.
the, yeah.
And was
So
that healthy volunteer or phase one oncology?
no, it was healthy volunteer.
Wow. So you did
Yeah.
phase one healthy volunteer. Those are
Yeah.
tough studies. Single
Well,
escalating, multiple ascending, all that stuff.
yeah. Well, it was an interesting experience. Um,
Wow. And that,
everything is an experience. Everything has nuances, and
absolutely.
it informed you know my further career. You know how I go about things and research, and but
Well,
that
it's
was very very
interesting.
interesting.
It's interesting looking at your LinkedIn. And like I said, guys, everything, I'm going to put Ellen's LinkedIn profile underneath the video and in the show notes. So go connect. But if you go look, okay, it alternates between, and sometimes at the same time, between academia and private industry, academia, private industry. It's strange because usually people pick one path, and I get accused of being too negative uh, on people who work in academia, and it's not the people who work there, guys. It's the I don't like the bureaucracy, and I think that can potentially hinder, if you're not in the right AMC, it can hinder your career development. But I always tell everybody, Alan, you're in the business of you, no matter who you work for. Like, your career is your business. That's for
Yeah.
you. That's your responsibility, not an AMC, not a private company. It's you. So it's just really cool to see this because, like I said, usually you don't see like this kind of overlap and back and forth. You have Temple University, you have Accurian, you have Inventive, you have UBC, back to Temple, IKEVIA, different volunteer. Razom, that's the one you were mentioning, right? Um, Veteranius Project, teach basic to advanced English to Ukrainian veterans who are taking Veteranius IT courses in Ukraine. Volunteer at a biotech project, Westchester Biotech Project, and now UC Davis. So it's like you're a generalist, true generalist. And RN, what makes you want to try so many things? You were mentioning earlier, like, it's exciting. You like this kind of change and change of pace, maybe. What is it like? What do you enjoy most about this industry? Because you have a good sample size of working at various different types of organizations.
I have to say, Dan, that some of those transitions were not by my personal choice as much as they were by the circumstance. Being a parent, um, a lot of times I just had to make the change. For example, I left UBC. I couldn't travel. There were other things, so
Mm,
it wasn't because I really, really, really wanted to make those changes, but I came to appreciate. I really came to appreciate what I gained. For example, I loved being a CRA. I
yeah,
absolutely loved being a CRA. I
I
would have
see that
stayed
on
with
here.
operations, I would have gone all the way up, like I would have really made a career out of it. However, due to family circumstances, I really couldn't travel anymore. And I was sending my CVs, I was doing interviews, and then Temple had a position. I had worked at Temple before, and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to go back to that. And then I'm like, no, I really have to. I need a job, with benefits. So I went, and it was a phenomenal position.
Mm,
If you could see the heart failure research
mm,
program,
mm-hmm.
a PI at Temple had a grant, and she was creating a heart failure research program from the ground up. And it
Wow.
was the most exciting opportunity because literally we built a biorepository, which now I know some about the biorepository world. Even attended the ISBER conference and got a glimpse. There's a lot of overlap between your regular research sites and the sites that do registries and biorepository work. So we created protocols, gave me a really wonderful insight into everything um, at a large academic institution, trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out all the workflows, um, talked to everybody there, created outreach materials, interacted with the community health workers, a lot of recruitment efforts, created, found a home care agency that we put on our protocol as a standby, kind of got a master agreement. So it was really interesting. It was, we did studies that recruited
Mm-hmm.
inpatients.
Okay.
So inpatients, outpatients, different specifics. Got to crawl all over Epic, and work with Epic teams, So it ultimately was the most wonderful experience. When I went for the interview, I was really honestly not 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 excited about that.
Why? What were you
because
not
I
excited
thought
about?
because I thought that would be just a step back. I
Mm.
thought, just
Because you were
going back
CRA
again.
and to go back
Because
to
I already
coordinator?
did other things. By that time, I had worked at Accurian. I had worked at as a global trial optimization specialist on oncology trial for a pharma company. I worked at the CRA. So going back, just doing um, routine coordinator work just wasn't really exciting. But I went, and it turned out to be the most wonderful opportunity.
So it turned out to be great, despite your perception that it wasn't going to be exciting. It surprised you.
It did,
Do you
and I'm
think that
really
has more
glad
to
that
do
I.
with the institution? Because if maybe you would have went somewhere else, it would have been totally different experience, same position, even same studies, maybe.
Yeah. Everything is, I guess, to a degree, a luck of the draw. Could have been a different PI.
Uh,
Um,
Everything. It's all the variables that.
Thing. Yeah, you
Yeah,
nailed it.
yeah. It's not so simple. Like, people try to think, okay, what's better, Dan, academia or private industry? I say whatever you feel like. I mean, it sounds like I'm not trying to answer the question, but how do I know? I wouldn't even know for myself which one I
But
prefer.
and the more you do, the more you explore those different aspects of clinical research, you gain perspectives. So, for
Yeah.
example, when you go then from the academia to a CRO, like I did back from Temple to IQVIA,
Was that
right?
easy transition?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Actually, you know what? Let me back up. When I came back to Temple as a coordinator after working in a CRO and a sponsor and at Accurian, I realized that I had so much insight into the workings of the CROs, the sponsors. That ordinarily a coordinator, like when I was working a coordinator initially, I didn't have that insight. I learned how to talk the talk.
Hmm.
I learned how to write my emails effectively, effective communication. I knew why, for example, the glitches in the EDC were there. Like I could understand, and I could perhaps even suggest like what the solution might be. And again, it can all expedited things. So it helps. It helped. And the same when I went from the site to a CRO again, the perspectives as coordinator perspectives really informed some of our work as a clinical nurse educator, because we work with sites a lot, and we need to motivate the sites. We need to try to help them figure out how to expedite, let's say, the startup, perhaps, and we had to help them figure out their recruitment strategies if they haven't had it down pat. So a lot of it's very helpful. Nothing goes to waste.
No, I think you brought up a good point about perspective, and I definitely want to get into your roles with Accurian as a feasibility specialist, inventive global trial optimization specialist, and IQVIA clinical trial educator. But from going from coordinator to CRA, before we move to those things, going from coordinator to CRA, I think is very valuable for CRAs. They tend to make better monitors, in my opinion. I did that before too. So when I was a coordinator, and now I'm back to being a coordinator, but when I started, I was a coordinator. Then I got a contract CRA role, like within 5 years. So when I was a coordinator, I was terrified of my monitors. Like I didn't want to talk
Exactly.
to them no more than what's necessary. And I like to talk, but I was like, no more than what's necessary. I was afraid that they're just looking to find stuff. And when I became a CRA, I realized that's not the case. But then I noticed that the sites I would interact with thought that way of me. So then I was like, look, I was just like you. Like I was afraid. You get nothing, you be afraid. Then it worked out, we were able to work more effectively because I had this communication and I had this perspective, like you said. So you had similar experience of going from CRC to CRA?
Exactly. Exact same experience then. Exact like at my first job, I was the lowest, like the newbie CRC. I actually wasn't even in CRC. I think I was called a research nurse. They explicitly told me, do not talk to the monitor. It was like the monitor, oh my God, everybody was just trembling. And yeah, exact same thing. I was fortunate that my CRAs were really wonderful as CRAs and people. So I've kept in touch with them later. I've kept in touch with a clinical trial educator that came to my site, like we're still friends. So it all depends, but like I second everything you say.
My first day, I never told anyone this, I don't think, but the first day I got my job as a research assistant, I was like you, fresh out of college. I just picked it because there was nothing else to do. So, first day, they had a site selection visit. This is my first day. I'm like 5 minutes into the office. The monitor's coming in 20 minutes later. I had no idea what this even is. The lady who was responsible for training me said, "You're going to go sit in this room. You're going to say yes to everything they ask you. And then you're going to say that you have experience with this, and this, all these assessments." I was like, okay. So monitor came. I just said yes the whole time. I didn't say another word, just yes. I had no clue what this stuff was. And then I carried that with me in my career. Just I was terrified the first couple of years, but once you gain perspective, like you said, and you, Ellen, gain so much perspective with your various roles. So, what I'm interested in this feasibility specialist with Acurian because they're a patient recruitment company, more or less, right? I mean, that's
That
their main job is to
yeah.
recruit patients. So, what was that like? Because here's my problem with these vendors, right? And this is why they need more people like you. They're so out of touch with what sites have to deal with. Uh, they have no clue how to present, even if you have a patient referral, they have no way to make that necessarily easy. It's this crazy process. By the time you can actually get the lead, the patient doesn't even remember they signed up for a study because there's so much red tape, and the vendors don't necessarily realize they don't have that perspective of what the coordinator have to deal with on a daily basis. So, what was your experiences like at a vendor like this?
So I must say that my experience with Acurian was several years ago. I left Acurian in 2015. So that company, I don't believe it exists as it is. It's called Accelerated Enrollment Solutions.
Hmm.
And
They
um,
changed their name?
from what I understand, when PPD
Okay, okay,
acquired them, perhaps like I haven't been really following very
okay.
closely. Um, there are quite a few companies that specialize in add-on enrollment, like add-on
Mhm,
recruitment. At Acurian at the time, it was a small company, but every feasibility specialist did have an experience as a coordinator. It was a growing field. A lot
okay.
of things were perhaps trial and error. However, um, it's not easy. I have to say, it is not easy to get the patients who are not currently the site's patients to come to the site to enroll in the trial. So our role as as feasibility specialists, there were several of us ultimately, was to start with the protocol because not every protocol is suitable for advertisement or that kind of enrollment.
Right.
So we had to start from there and then read the protocol, assess the protocol. Is it possible? Is it not possible? We supported business development. So I forgot to say there was a lot of that. We had to support business development, which is fun.
To get more
Very
sponsors
frustrating.
and CROs interested, right?
Well, they count executives. They had to present. They had to respond to the request for proposals. They had to know what we can do as a company, and we as feasibility specialists were basically informing them what solutions might be, what could be presented.
I got you.
Was a lot of back and forth. The pace was very fast. Lots
Fast.
of protocols, all kinds of therapeutic areas, indications, because not only we did the recruitment, but we also did the retention. Don't forget about retention. It's a huge piece.
Everybody forgets about retention.
We should never forget. I
Nope.
think we should start saying retention and recruitment, right? And
That
then
would make
maybe
more
we'll get
sense.
enough.
You know what? That makes more sense. I know it's a segue, but I found it much more efficient. Once we exhausted my PI's database, like his or her own patients, you exhaust that very quickly with some of these protocols too. The next best thing is to retain your patients that you already have long enough to where they're comfortable referring others.
Yep.
So I think you're absolutely right when you say it should be retention and then recruitment.
So, and then it would be the work of technically trying to figure out to do the number crunching, sort of like you make the assumptions, you figure out what the population is, what the geographic areas, does it overlap with sites, or can we suggest the sites in certain areas? Um, what percentage of do we have data on what percentage of patients, for example, are on metformin? But
Wow, so you guys
have
got
never
very
taken it.
granular.
So it was so there was internal data that we worked with based
Yeah.
on the previous recruitment efforts, and there was data from the outside. When I worked at as a clinic global trial optimization specialist, we used trial I think it's called Sightline. I forgot the databases, the commercial databases that provide the data. Honestly, you can even go to clinicaltrials.gov, and if you know what you're looking for, you can get valuable insights from there, valuable data from there. Um, so
What data did you get from there? Like, so in your role here at Acurian, you were sponsor and CRO facing. So you were on the feasibility side. What does that mean? That means you're helping them.
so we
Because
weren't
I
in a
understand that they already have their sites, no? The sponsor and CRO.
yes. So we were providing support to the project management, the business development project management. Um, so we would develop the strategy. Like first of all, again, we'd say, is it feasible? Is it not feasible? Is it worth it? Or will it be too expensive, for your efforts? And you
Okay.
probably won't net enough patients. And then we would develop the what's called screeners, pre-screeners, the questionnaires, and you will be racking your brain. How do I ask the questions? And the patient who is absolutely clueless would provide some sort of like reliable information, or should we just forget about it and just send this patient to site? There was a very delicate balancing act between um, sending the patients to the sites that were very likely potential candidates, because
Yeah.
we don't want to send everybody to the site. So right now, for example, one of the people I worked with at Acurian, he's not Trial B, and Trial B is another a great a great company, and they see all kinds of support. They're like nurses triaging patients, even before those patients get to the site. So like the Trial B nurses. It all depends on the project, the complexity of the project. There are
Wow.
many variables, but and then you support the sites. You had to train the sites. How do we use? How do we work as a site? How do you work with the recruitment service? Like, because there is another portal. Like, what do you do? What's the follow up? What
Yeah.
do you expect? And then don't forget about the recruitment and retention materials. There were some projects that only included, let's say, brochures or websites or something like that for this site.
My first experience with Icurian, I worked with them a lot more 7 years ago when I started my CRO. But my first experience with them was as a coordinator when I actually became the site owner through some crazy circumstances. And I remember doing the study, and we were we were okay in roller actually. We were like towards the high end, not the top end roller, but like it within the top probably 20%. And
Very respectable.
yeah, yeah. So I remember my monitor telling me hey, there's this company we're working with that's gonna send you patients. And I was like, as a new business owner, I'm like, I'm not interested. I told them that like I don't want to pay for anything like this, and they and they're like, no, the sponsor is paying for it. All you have to do is call these people. So I would get a fax. This was like before email. They would fax me every week a list of patients. And then I would call them. And initially, I was so excited. I was like, okay, this is awesome. But none of them, I either got hung up on, cursed out. It was a psychiatry study, so it was difficult. Um, or I don't know why you're calling me. So by the time you go through like 20 of those, you're like, why am I wasting my time with this,
Mm,
every week?
mm.
And I had to send a log back to a Curian every week, patient by
Right.
patient, what happened. And I got sick of doing that. But so I could feel the pain. But you worked at this company, not during
Yeah,
that time, but you worked for the same company.
probably.
That's
Yeah, I think I already left. But you know what? It's very important to get sites feedback, and it's an ongoing process. So my advice to the sites is don't be afraid of those services. And this is what I, was actually saying at my recent job, as a clinical nurse educator to the sites. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid. This is great. This is your support. It all depends on how you approach it, and give feedback. If you think that the patients are not qualified because of XYZ, don't sit on this and just be like, sulk on them. Just make sure
salty.
you sulk. No, I mean like don't don't just
Don't
sulk.
get down in the
Don't
dumps.
get down in the dumps and not
That
tell
was me.
anybody and just like complain. Make sure you tell your CRA. That's your first
I
line of
didn't want to
defense.
tell my CRA, so you guys do what Ellen's saying, okay? Do what
Well,
Ellen's
just
saying.
give some feedback. Don't be afraid because everybody's interested in sites enrolling patients.
Yeah,
It's everybody's in it together. So sometimes the sites just don't have the time to do the ultimate like scheduling and everything. It is hard.
right.
It is hard. Nobody thinks that it's easy, but hopefully there are ways to improve that.
Before we get to clinical trial educator and global trial optimization specialist, uh, from all the jobs you had, which one was your favorite and which one was the most challenging? Your current one, you can
Personally,
say your current one is your most favorite. Keep them happy right now.
I, I'm very happy where I am right now, which is not really in research. I'm currently in IT. But
Okay.
again, everything I learned in research, I'm using right now. And I'm gaining a lot of insight into the workings of the academic site that I haven't had a chance to be exposed before. For example, coverage analysis, the financials, the budget. So, and again, a very healthy appreciation for technology. And so everything, nothing, I'm using everything. So, but personally, I really like being a CRA
Oh, you did.
because
Okay.
as a CRA, I had a chance to support my sites to make the and I could troubleshoot, and I had to deal with all the aspects of whatever sites we're dealing with, be it PROs, EDC, drug accountability, like everything in it, supplies, enrollment, recruitment, just listening to letting the coordinators vent and trying to help them out and sometimes the site like one site they had a hard time getting through to a investigator, not getting through, but the investigator wanted to enroll patients, and sometimes the coordinators didn't think the patients were quite reliable for various reasons. So I just kind of had to say, yeah, you can enroll, but we really need patients who will stick with the study. And when I kind of said that as a CRA, it did make an impression,
Hmm.
and the coordinators appreciated that, and I spoke up for them. So
See,
it's
that's awesome, actually. You're an
Mhm.
ally. I think, yeah, I think a lot of coordinators, and I think it would make a easier and more efficient working environment. And guess which CRA that coordinator is going to respond to? Chris always tells this story. Okay, I think this is a good one, and then we'll get to your other two roles that I want to discuss. He was a court when he was a coordinator. He was at Disneyland, and he took Friday. Every Fridays that site was closed. Okay, so it was Friday. He was at Disneyland. Well, one of his studies had a database lock. Okay.
Oh God.
And the CRA was so anxious to get this done that day, but he was at Disneyland. So, but he said he left Disneyland early to take care of it for this CRA only because she was nice to him during their working relationship. It was like a year or so. Like she usually went out of her way to help them out, just like you said with what you did. So then the coordinator, you know
Um,
what? If it would have been a nasty monitor asking for that, guess what would happen? You've been on Splash Mountain, and you're
don't want
gonna
to go
worry
there.
about your database lock another time. So that's a really good point that you brought up, Alan, with CRA CRC
Yeah.
relationship.
I think it all starts there. Everybody knows it, and I think fear is the biggest obstacle. The fear that in misperception, like you said, that the CRAs are there to find faults, to find errors.
They're
Yes, of course,
police. I used to
everybody's
think they were like
human.
police.
Exactly, like everybody's human. We tell we used to tell the sites like, yes, even if you make an error, like it just let us know right away. Things nobody is perfect, but we have to find ways to minimize those errors. Let's keep the dialogue going, and I think that's the most important. So yeah, personally, I like this CRA position the most, and of
That's
course, I like
awesome.
to travel because I got to visit Louisiana and Wisconsin and other places that
I
I
love New
probably
Orleans.
normally wouldn't have
That's
visited.
awesome. That's something
Um,
that's underrated about CRA too, is all the travel you do.
yeah,
It,
got to meet a lot of people and different sites.
yeah, that's
My
really
most
cool.
challenging,
Yeah, most
I think,
challenging from all your role.
I think being a coordinator at a large academic site, um, managing outpatient and inpatient trials was the most challenging. There was an
But why?
inpatient trial.
Because I only monitored two AMCs uh, as a CRA, and it seemed like everything was so streamlined. The coordinators just kind of nothing was anyone's responsibility. That was what I noticed as a CRA. Well, when I needed something, coordinator said, "Oh, I don't do that. I only do this." Then I asked that person. They're like, "No, no, I don't do that. I only do every." They had
Um,
like 20 people. Nobody can do it.
Perhaps that was your experience.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say it probably was the most physically and mentally exhausting
Wow. Really?
because of the number of trials. Um, because especially because I was in the inpatient trials that you couldn't predict when the patient would develop septic shock
Wow.
and do certain procedures. So you had to be on your toes, and of course, it's not for everybody. It was very hard to manage, along with raising children and
Wow.
and I think honestly, this position as a coordinator wouldn't have been so hard for me personally. So challenging if um, I think it was just physically. I think it was just the sheer volume. Like there was nothing super complicated about this, and everything. It was rewarding to work with the patients and with the doctors and with sponsors with different trials. So it was a really interesting. It was a great job, but for me, I think it was the most challenging because you just had to keep it all together. There are a couple of cartoons, like CRC cartoons. I'll find them. I think you probably saw them, like the coordinate. Yeah, totally. And I feel the site's pain and
Wow.
everywhere. I doubt that there is a site that's completely fully staffed and doesn't need any help.
Oh,
I think
no.
overwhelmingly it's a big issue. So I think that's why, because it was just so challenging. And again, sometimes you know you had to reach out and depend on different departments that would take forever to turn things around, and the sponsor asking you, the monitor was asking you what's going on, and you had to ask them what's going on, and and so forth. But yeah, the job itself, like some people really love it, and I think it could be a fantastic opportunity,
Yeah.
especially in a place with good benefits and not much career growth. Though I have to say, I don't think it's for people who um, to grow their career. Um, yeah, you can become a manager or like a senior CRC, but I think really to expand your horizons, I don't think there's enough room there to grow for many people.
It's too much.
Um,
Too many people at the top that are comfortable.
just like there's just not many opportunities for that, but
Yeah.
everybody needs CRCs. So
Everybody, yeah,
especially
labor
now.
shortage. Well, why don't they? I mean, at some of these small sites, I kind of understand why owning one now again. I understand. I'm not going to hire someone until we randomize a certain number of patients. Then I feel comfortable to hire a patient or a study coordinator. But like at an AMC, maybe it's the same, but they have certain budgets, right? And I know every AMC is different, but why don't they, if they need more staff, why don't they just hire another RN like when you were research naive and bring you on, bring that person on?
Well, let me ask you this. And maybe you have a phenomenally staffed site, and all the time in the world to actually mentor a
Mm.
brand new coordinator. Do sites really have that bandwidth?
Ah, so it's
So that's where
more,
you come in.
yeah, yeah, I
That's where your
see.
CRC Academy comes in. But just wanted, because I have only for a couple of minutes left. I have to go back to work. I work
Okay,
in California time. I took a
I totally
lunchtime.
forgot. Yeah, UC Davis, UC Davis. So what else do you want to say that we haven't said so far? You want to bring it back to Ukraine?
I want to mention a couple of things. Again, just wanted to mention about CRA. Your CRA Academy and CRC Academy.
Thank you,
They're
thank you.
wonderful. If I had that available to me when I was transitioning, perhaps the transition would have been even much easier. But I was lucky. UBC at the time opened up a CRA class, so that's how I made a transition. I wanted to mention that I only have associate's degree. My life just kind of like happened that way, and in
Wow.
spite of that. I mean, I lost many opportunities. I wasn't even considered. However, for look where I am right now and what I've done, and I'm grateful for people who could see beyond my credentials. At the time I did my RN, bachelor's was not required. There were still nursing schools around,
Right, right, right,
and I
right.
was fresh off the boat, immigrant, so like I didn't know any better. And
Eastern
then life
Europe.
took yeah. So, and I'm going to say to your audience, don't be scared. Explore, start from somewhere, reach out to people in the industry. A lot of people are just really very happy to share their experiences. So there is room for everybody.
Man, Ellen, thank you so much. Again, if your site you want to donate supplies,
Yeah.
anything to the Ukraine cause, supplies, money, anything, check out the email underneath. Okay, that's the email for Ellen. And if you're somebody just wanting to network with Ellen, LinkedIn, she's on LinkedIn, so
Yeah.
go check it out. Go
And
connect. We
then,
could have done another hour. This is too easy of an
well,
interview.
you can, I can come back.
We'll come
But
back. We have to come back.
so if it's okay, I'll send you a link to organizations that accept donations and other ways to help Ukraine.
Yeah,
And we hope that there's going to be peace soon.
we can only hope and pray. The whole world is honestly praying for that.
Thank
So
you, Dan.
thank you, Ellen. I appreciate it. Go back to work. Thank you for
Thank
spending
you.
your lunchtime with Guru Nation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye, everybody.